The following is a paid program by Zola Levitt Ministries. Anger in Gaza, war in Lebanon, rumblings in Iran. As the world focuses on the Mideast quagmire, Zola Levitt Ministries presents Daniel and the Last Days Battle for Planet Earth.
A hearty shalom to all of you. Jeffrey Seif here with my friend Sandra Levitt, and we've got a great program in store.
Shalom, welcome back. We're going to talk about cultures today. A clash of cultures. Civilizations have always clashed. It always seems to me, Jeff, that it's the good and the bad and the ugly and the not ugly and the civilizations clash. You know, Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. I believe he's right.
Right. Now, we hate that tension. We hate those clashes. The point is, it's observed in biblical literature at day's end, titanic forces coming and expressing their angst, and you're going to see it in Daniel, the last day's battle for planet Earth.
Civilizations collided in the ancient world. As today, nations lift swords against nations. Wars and rumors of wars abound. Looking at the world through Daniel's prophecies, we learn how, as the battle rages on, God still watches over and protects his people, Israel.
Our journey across Israel continues and takes us to Caesarea, Rome's first-century military headquarters in Judea. Join me as I visit the place where East and West once collided. Jesus, in his own words, spoke about a world at day's end that was full of wars and rumors of wars. I can't help but wonder whether the clash of titanic forces noted in Daniel was on his mind as he spoke from the Mount of Olives that fateful day some 2,000 years ago. Speaking from this place, Caesarea Maritime, this was the Roman home away from home. As the Romans might put it, as the Hebrews might put it, this is the lair of the devil. For Roman legionnaires came from the sea, and here they were dispatched to the Roman province, the far eastern province of Judea, and there they occupied this sacred land. Fascinating are the tensions and the wars that are predicted by the prophet Daniel, who in fact even saw the Kittim coming, those from the west. He envisioned them sweeping up onto the shores of Judea. And here we are at the places where they swept up. But our story today actually begins at another story in the book of Daniel, noted in the 8th chapter, if you'll pick up in the beginning, chapter 8, verse 1 and on, we see that Daniel himself is taken up and placed there by a river in Persia, in Elam, a capital city of what was then the Persian Empire, what is now, ominously, the nation-state of Iran. And what happens is Daniel there sees a vision. He sees a vision of a feisty ram that's pushing northward, westward, and all about. And then he's going to vision another animal coming and clashing. It's a very fantastic text for a variety of reasons. Let's attend to it, and then I'll offer something of an explanation. If you'll look in chapter 8 again, in verse 2, Daniel says that he sees a vision. He says that he was in Shushan, the castle, which is in the province of Elam. And Elam, again, in antiquity, would be Iran in modernity. The Lord took him there. And he sees a beast with horns. If you look in verse 4, he sees this ram pushing westward and northward and southward, and no beast could stand before him. As you're going to see in a few moments, this is Daniel's giving a description of the Persian Empire that was strong, that was feisty, like a feisty ram that would push and overwhelm its foes. As he says here in the text, no beast could stand before this animal, and that he did according to his will, and he magnifies himself. This is Persia at its zenith. He goes on to say in verse 5, as he was considering this ram, behold, a he-goat came from the west over the face of the whole earth. So it's interesting, you have an animal at the east that's pressing westward. And then he, while he's considering that, sees an animal at the west that's pushing eastward. And inasmuch as he looks at the Persians that are making their way west, he now envisions the Greeks, as you'll see, or Western culture by association, pushing its way east. So we see here the clash of cultures. I remember, by the way, when viewing tensions in the Middle East and considering Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's bid to destroy Israel, and while considering bin Laden and his cohorts, their war against the West because of their association with Israel, when I see Western culture and Mohammedan culture clashing, I ask myself the question, do I see this at all in biblical literature? Well, friends, we see it happening here in this book, Daniel, the end-time book. We see this, to use the language of the text, a ram that's pushing westward, and now a goat, as you're going to see, is Greece. It says as much in a moment. And as I was considering, behold, a goat came from the west over the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the he-goat had a horn between his eyes. In verse 7 he says, I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved against him, and smote the ram, and broke his horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. This goat that comes from the west and squares off against these eastern forces just overruns him in no uncertain terms. We're told in the text that the ram couldn't stand before him, but that he cast him to the ground and trampled upon him. The story goes on, and it's a fascinating story, and the implications to me are rather striking. What does this mean? Well, this is a text that's interpreted within the text. If you'll look with me, please. In verse 19, Daniel is told, I will make you know what shall be in the latter time of the indignation. There's a prophecy here for the end. He says, the ram which you saw having two horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia. That is to say, these are the kings that come out of what would be modern Iran. And then he says, in that rough he-goat that you saw, this is the king of Greece. Again, what we find here in the text is a clash of cultures, out of Iran on the one hand and out of the West on the other. My, are we not seeing this kind of story played out in our very day?
I love your teaching, Jeff, at the theater in Caesarea. Two different places. We go to the theater, and then we go to the hippodrome, which was, originally the hippodrome was used for racing and things, but later on it's used for much more sinister things.
Yes, dastardly, in fact, with the destruction of life. They would throw Jews and believers to the lions there. As it goes with the Jews, so it goes with believers. It's unfortunate.
We better watch that with Israel, too.
Yes, it's amazing. There's rank wickedness in this world. Daniel addresses that in the person of the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist. John, in his own way, quotes Jesus saying that the devil comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. That's a horrible nature. The devil is identified as having it in John, but Daniel sees this too.
But we know what the Messiah looks like. And now we're going to find out what the Antichrist looks like. And he has got definite characteristics.
Right. It's not a pretty picture, but it's a picture to see. For some, it must have been a death march. For here at the Herodian Stadium, just outside of the theater in Caesarea, this marked a spot where many Jews were drug out. They were fed to wild beasts. They were forced into gladiatorial combat. And as it went with the Jews, so too it went with the Christians. Right here in this spot, in the walk that I just made for many, in a day gone by would have been their last. Oh, what a dread place at one level. Seems to me an appropriate time to talk about the greatest trial on earth. You might recall in the Matthean Gospel, chapter 24, verse 15, Jesus said, "When you see the desolating sacrilege spoken of by the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand." He says then in verse 16, "Let those who are in Judea flee." He says, "Let those that are on the housetop not go into the house, take anything. Woe to those who are with child." Jesus warns of a time of dread terror on planet Earth. The clash of titanic forces noted by Daniel between forces east and west colliding. It was in this context where Daniel spoke of the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist, who would emerge out of the Greek conquest. Here we are at the place where Rome held sway, the lair of the lion, where the Romans came in mass. And it was against this backdrop in part when Jesus himself spoke of a coming destruction that would be brought about by the Romans when Judea would be surrounded and compromised. Oh, Jesus spoke of wars and rumors of wars. And we're going to see how the wars that he spoke about were envisioned early on by Daniel, who saw a clash of cultures between East and West. And he saw one emerging out of Western culture who would be the Antichrist to come. I wonder if they really enjoyed themselves. Certainly they howled, they screamed, emotions ran high, but whatever emotions were running high here in the seats paled in comparison to what happened in the sand as prisoners ran for their life. Jewish prisoners thrown here to meet an inglorious end with wild beasts, to face gladiators stronger than they. And Christians as well were gathered in mass to go to a mass grave here, to be thrown to the beasts, hungry. They tasted blood and they wanted more of it. What a horrible end at one level. And speaking of the end, Daniel had presaged years before Jesus made his entrance onto the stage of the human drama that there in fact would be a time of the end. And while the end at one level was good, because the end of the current age then was the beginning of an epic in human experience when the earth would be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. There was a new world dawning. But as it is the case with the sun, you might recall that it gets darkest just before the dawn. And before the dawning of the new era, of the Messianic era, the world goes dark. The world goes pitch black at the end of days. Horrors are decreed, tribulations to be unleashed on planet Earth. Daniel saw this and more. In fact, in the book of Daniel on more than one occasion, he was left speechless. Even after seeing a vision more than once, he couldn't get up, save for an angel coming and lifting him up. Well, in one of those messages, when he was on his feet, he spoke about a last days world. He spoke in Daniel chapter 8, verse 13. He says it explicitly, both the sanctuary and the host will be trampled underfoot. Daniel was shocked to consider such an inglorious demise to the sanctuary, the Beit HaMikdash, the holy house. We're told in verse 15, I, Daniel, when I saw it, I was shocked. And he says in verse 16, I heard a voice that called to me, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. And here Gabriel makes his entrance onto the stage of world history, particularly to help a shocked Daniel envision the warfare at the end of days, where it becomes pitch black with the prince of darkness making his presence known. And he says in verse 17, understand that this vision is for the time of the end. Fantastic language here. I don't mean in a glorious sense. I just mean you can feel the emotion in the literature. Daniel is perplexed. He needs help just to see and consider what he's looking at. And as he was speaking, he says in verse 19, look, I am going to make known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation. This rage is let out of the cage. And Daniel is the one to bring the word. Oh, it's a word sealed up. For more than once, and particularly at the end of the 12th chapter, Daniel is told the vision is to be sealed up until the end. It's confusing. Here we're told in verse 21 and on, he speaks about this kingdom of the West and the kingdom of Persia clashing and fighting and going at it. And all this is part of an end-time story according to the text. And I can't help but wonder, as I look at the Word on one hand and as I look at the modern world in the other, and I see the forces, titanic forces from the East, the Middle East, clashing with forces from the West, Western culture, and they sweep up against each other, I'm wondering if what I'm seeing in the world today is what shocked Daniel yesterday. There's more to be told, and the story will unfold as we consider Daniel and the last day's battle for planet Earth.
For insightful perspectives of Israel and Bible prophecy, ask for our free monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter. When you call, be sure to also ask for our free catalog with the latest videos, books, and music. Our correspondence course, the Institute of Jewish Christian Studies, includes reading packets, teaching cassettes, and mail-in tests. You may want to join us on an upcoming tour of Israel, Greece, or the Holy Land Experience theme park in Orlando, Florida. Please contact us for more information.
Israel's a wonderful place. It's a good place to go. It's a safe place still. Why don't you join me and Sandra in the Holy Land, and let's walk where Jesus walked.
I say it again, Jeff. We go to Caesarea. We see all these sights. It makes the Bible come alive. One of the people that I really enjoyed interviewing was Joel Rosenberg. We tried to get him for many, many years, and our schedules wouldn't work. And we're in Israel, and we're interviewing Caleb Myers, and Caleb says, oh, I had dinner with Joel. And we all just get real excited, and we call, and in Israel, we get to interview Joel Rosenberg. He is so fascinating. He's written a book called Epicenter, which is his first nonfiction book. And he's a terrific guy, knows his stuff, was an advisor to Netanyahu and to Sharansky. Really terrific.
He wrote as a ghost for Rush Limbaugh.
That's right. He's
a New York Times best-selling author.
He's one of my favorite. I get so excited every time I think that we talk to him. And a nice, nice guy. I know you'll enjoy this interview.
For example, to show that in 1967 and 73, the Soviet Union was this close to sending ground troops into Israel to take over Israel along with the Arab forces. And it took President Johnson in the first case, Nixon in the second case, to put America on a nuclear alert to keep the Russians out. Now, at that moment, you could have thought, wow, the war of Gog and Magog,
right.
Ezekiel 38 and 39,
coming.
maybe it's coming true right this moment. we always have to be cautious and say God could kick the can of this prophecy up the road a number of years. And so now we're watching Russia and Iran build a military alliance for the first time in the 2,500 years since Ezekiel said it would one day happen in the last days. Does that mean the war is going to happen soon? I don't know. I can't rule it in, but I can't rule it out either, especially in light of the fact that Ezekiel 36 and 37 have already come true. We're sitting in Israel, it's reborn, the ancient ruins have been rebuilt, Jews are pouring back in from all over the world, and it does beg the question, if Ezekiel 36 and 37 have come true in our lifetime, isn't it possible that Ezekiel 38 and 39 could come true as well? And any time that he delays at this point is a matter of bringing people into the kingdom. And a big question, for my wife and kids and I is when we see Jesus face to face, is he going to say, Joel, I'm really glad that whole thing with the novels worked out. That's fantastic. But son, what part of the Great Commission, go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations, your Jewish neighbors and friends because you're Jewish, but also your enemies in Iran and in Russia and Sudan. What part of the Great Commission did you not understand, son? I mean, was it in Greek? All right, well, actually it was.
Well,
but you know, you got all those translations. And I don't want him to be ashamed of me, of my wife, of my boys. And we want to use these novels as God gives us opportunity to talk to people about Jesus and about how much he loves us and how the wonderful plan he has for our lives. He had a Muslim Arab leader who somebody had given him the Ezekiel option. In his country, in the Middle East, he was coming to Washington for meetings at the State Department and the White House, and an assistant called me and said he'd like to have dinner with you and talk to you about the Christian view of the end times. I thought, okay, 1 week we're having Passover in this dining room. Sure, okay, we'd love to have him for dinner. It was an amazing conversation. Yeah. Israeli leaders, just taking me, aside. I'd love to talk to you about this. The senior advisor to the Prime Minister of Iraq, when the Prime Minister came to Washington to give his address to the joint session of Congress, I was privileged to go. I thought that was enough. I get a phone call, hey, would you have breakfast with the senior advisor to the Prime Minister? We understand you write novels that come true, and we're curious, what does the Bible have to say about Iraq and its future?
Oh,
So, well, there's a little bit there, We had
Do they really want to know?
I know. Well, it's interesting. I did say to them, look, you've got tougher times ahead for you. But in the near term, the Bible does talk about Iraq becoming incredibly prosperous. Revelation 18 is talking about, of course, the end of that, right, and how Babylon is being destroyed and all the merchants of the earth are horrified. That must mean that things at some point quiet down and wealth pours into that country. So there's a zone, there's a window that I think God is going to show favor on Iraq, and a zone that we've got to get the gospel in there because they need good news more than ever before.
So you're saying we should stay the course in Iraq?
I think there's two tracks. As believers, there's a geopolitical track that our president and Congress have to win the war and defeat radical Islam, or send a message to Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas that we give up. And I don't want that message to be sent. Right. Separately, believers need to realize that we've got to get the gospel into these countries. They are dying without any hope of salvation. They've got no assurance of salvation. And yet more Iraqis are coming to Christ today than at any other time in human history. One pastor told me, he said, Joel, you have to look at Iraq very much like Daniel chapter 2. And he said, in that story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Nebuchadnezzar heats up the fires in Babylon 7 times hotter than before. He said, when you look at Iraq today, it is 7 times hotter than it was when Saddam was here. I'm not saying we're glad that Saddam is gone, right, he said, but it is rough, and it's rougher than it was in a number of ways. But what was the rest of that story? He said, when Nebuchadnezzar looked into that fiery furnace, he didn't see 3 men. He said the 4th looked like a son of the gods. He said, Jesus is walking in the fires with us. It's worse than ever before, but we're seeing so many people come to know the Lord. And he said, go back to the West and tell people that God is moving.
What did Joel say? He said, tell people that God is moving. So important to keep optimistic at one level, but it isn't just raw optimism. It's fascinating how amidst the turbulence of trying times, God is getting past the iron curtains. He's getting into worlds unknown to us, previously untapped by the gospel. I can't help but wonder that it may well be that the Lord is getting into some new worlds now as you listen, as you hear the Word of God unpacked, and you're impacted and wondering if God is saying something to you. And I want you to know the answer to that question is yes. If you would just respond and say yes, if you would reach past your sins and reach up to the new life that's available to you, you can be born anew and experience brand new vistas that'll open up your life. Isn't that true, Sandra?
It's wonderful. I know Joel says it funny. He said, what part of witnessing do you not understand? A Great Commission do you not understand? And it's a funny thing to say, but we really do need to witness. We really do need to know the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach. He is our Messiah. He is our way. He is our life. Thank you for watching. God bless you. And Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Our offer on this program, the Pray for the Peace of Jerusalem bumper sticker. Now you can proudly display what we say at the end of each program. Printed on removable vinyl, this striking bumper sticker measures 3 3/4 inches by 11 1/2 inches. You'll want to pass some of these on to your friends. Ask for the Pray for the Peace of Jerusalem bumper sticker. And you may also call toll-free for our colorful monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter. This free publication includes Bible lessons, insightful news commentary, Hebrew lessons, and more. Call 1-800-WONDERS. That's 1-800-966-3377. Or write to Zola, Box 12268, Dallas, Texas 75225. You can also see our Levitt letters, TV programs, and national airing schedule at www.levitt.com. Please remember, Zola Levitt Ministries depends on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you. This has been a paid program brought to you by Zola Levitt Ministries.